pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since the Commission is present, we have a roll call. Commissioner Ames had communicated previously that he would not be able to be with us tonight. So, first item on our agenda is the budget schedule. First item on that schedule is number 2.5, Androscoggin Saginaw Extension Association. Welcome.
Hi, how are
Thank you. My name is Scott Roberts. I am the current president of the executive committee. This is Christy Willett. She is one of our educators. And this is Jo Jean Keller. She also serves on the executive committee. I'd like to start off by thanking you for your ongoing support over the years. We do appreciate that. And then secondly, also I'd like to thank you for allowing us to push this meeting back by a couple of weeks. We were having protocol issues with the University of Maine system and what we could and couldn't do, so that reprieve made it a lot easier for us, and we really appreciate that. So I guess to start, I'd like to say, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what the Cooperative Extension and the Androscoggin Saginaw Counties Extension Association does. If you'd like me to give you a little briefing on that, I'd be happy to, or do you want to go right to the budget?
That'd be great. Give us a little briefing.
The Cooperative Extension Association itself provides the building and the resources for the cooperative extension, which is part of the University of Maine, to operate in our two counties, Androscoggin and Saginaw. So we provide office space, office equipment, telephones, all those types of services, so they can go about doing what they do. And I think there are, what, 14 people in the office? What's the number?
We're down to 10.
Down to 10,
Yep.
okay. Doing a variety of things, which Christy can give you more detail on. She happens to be our 4-H, our youth educator, so you want to give a little rundown?
Sure, so I think you'll probably notice in our budget request that there's a percentage attached to it. So that was an agreement that was decided between Androscoggin and Saginaw counties based on population. So Androscoggin County funds 63%, and Saginaw County funds the remaining of kind of the operating costs of the extension office. The salaries, benefits, and all of those things are provided through the university, and you'll see that kind of pie graph broken down in our original budget request. What we just passed out today is just some highlights of what we've been doing since COVID-19 started in March. Although our extension offices, the physical locations have been closed, we've actually been busier than ever. The COVID-19 has really forced us to be creative in terms of how we do outreach in this kind of pandemic. So we did not stop programming. We actually did some really cool innovations, and you'll see those highlighted in the handout that we just handed out. So like Scott said, we have 11 staff people, 10 staff people. We have 2 major program focuses. So we have 4-H youth development, which is my area of expertise, and then the Maine food systems, supporting farmers and local businesses around anything that's grown locally here in Maine. And that's kind of the gist of what Extension does. We are the largest department of the university. There's an office in every single county, and we serve lots of residents in both Androscoggin and Saginaw counties. So questions, comments?
Commissioner?
Sure, thank you for sharing and giving that good explanation. Your office that serves Saginaw and our counties in Lisbon, is that right?
Yes, Lisbon Falls, right on Main Street, which is currently closed. Half of it at least.
Definitely, yes.
Sure.
I have a question. So this is for the association or for the extension itself?
This is for the extension office to operate. So you will see there is a salary line there that pays for our support staff person who manages our office.
Okay.
But all of the educators or anyone that's providing education to the public is funded through the university.
And I see that your budget for FY20 is unchanged from FY.
We're asking for
19.
flat funding. Yep.
And FY19 you had a loss, is that correct? $7,900?
Well, basically, and I've been before you guys, I think, for the last 5 years now. seems like just yesterday when I started. And our funding has pretty much been flat that entire time. It's because we don't have a lot of variables. You know, we might have a warmer winter, so we spend a little less on fuel oil, but it averages out the next winter. We've got contractual costs with copiers, and you know those things. So we don't have a lot of flexibility and ups and downs. Pretty much what's in there is what we spend historically year after year after year.
Right.
And there's just a
People
lot
worry
of.
about the revenue side, is what I'm asking, because I get that, but like last year you had a, for FY '19.
We had some building issues at that point.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, basically, some building
So
issues.
they were just kind of one-off
Yeah,
expectations?
well, unfortunately, yeah, I think the size of those, I don't remember now, but the size of those was kind of the one-off. But, for example, I was in the office at the office a couple of weeks ago to sign checks, and we were walking around outside, and we noticed we had broken steps on the fire escape ladder coming down, so we had to get a quote to have that fixed. So, you know, those are the things that come up that we don't have specifically as line items. They're covered as part of building maintenance, but that number kind of goes up and down over the years and averages out.
And we're the only two funding sources?
Correct.
There's no other fundraising or anything like
Not at this time. There is a CD that was established through the association back when the association charged dues, so like 40 or 50 years ago. And that is what the association currently uses for any capital improvements. We don't use county funding for capital improvements, so there's like $23,000,
Between 20 and 25.
yeah, give or take, in that CD that they can pull from for those capital improvements.
that? Thanks.
Did the district change in a fairly recent past? Was it used to be just Androscoggin, or Androscoggin, and was it Tri-County thing?
It's been Androscoggin and Saginaw County combined, I think, since like 1986.
Okay.
But you'll see, there are some services in our, like Tri-County, but we only receive funding from Androscoggin and Saginaw counties.
And you're still involved with 4-H?
Yes, yes,
That's Christie's thing.
that's my thing,
That's your thing?
yes.
Even though there's no fairs anymore?
Yeah, so
Virtual
did you
fairs.
see our virtual
Virtual
fair? We
fairs.
did a virtual
It could be-
fair.
It could be huge, who knows?
It was great. We had 87 kids across the state participate and had over 215 exhibits. It's virtual. You can walk. You can go into it. We use a program called Art Steps. It's very cool, and you can see all the kids' displays. And they were judged and they received prizes. But yeah, we're missing our fairs. It's weird for me right now because I'm typically like gearing up for Eastern States down in Springfield, and we're not doing that. But it has allowed us to do some more innovative stuff that isn't specifically around the fairs. But yeah, kids are super involved. And specifically to Androscoggin County, I guess I should mention with 4-H, we're on our second round of federal funding, specifically geared towards Lewiston and working with teens in Lewiston around workforce and college readiness. So we, this summer, kicked it off and had 10 teen teachers that created some instructional videos. And then we did 100 toolkits that were delivered at Hillview Resource Center, Boys and Girls Club, the Tree Street and McMahon Elementary School, and families could watch the videos and do the science experiments with the teens. So that still happened, and that's something that we typically do every summer, but usually our teams go in and teach, but now they have to do it virtual. So just because we've had some restrictions in terms of how we deliver our programs, it hasn't stopped us from delivering programming.
Thank you. I just noticed the flip side of your hand.
Yeah.
Where I described before.
Yeah, we're over here, yeah.
Sorry to be redundant. And Commissioner Madore asked a question. Your office is in
Lisbon Falls.
Okay, I
Yeah.
thought I heard Lewiston, but then I see.
No, it's 24 Main Street.
Okay.
And when we open back up on Monday, you should come visit sometime. It's a pretty awesome space.
You should, okay. Further questions?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner?
on one of your pages it mentions social justice, including legal.
Yep.
Could you explain that and go into detail on what that was all about?
Sure. So that is one of our focus areas for our teens, and it's actually the one that we're going to kick off in the fall. It came about because our teens during our needs assessment were really interested in learning how to advocate for issues that were important to them as families. So it's nonpartisan, obviously, working with, hopefully, we're still kind of setting this up, but thinking about how we can encourage young people to use their voice to make change within their community. So you might, as county commissioners, hear from them because we're encouraging them to learn how issues get brought up in an appropriate way, how you can advocate for those things, and how you can make change.
Wouldn't that be provided in your required curriculum for school, at high school level anyways?
Potentially, but this is informal education, so it's not necessarily looking at those main learning results. It's thinking about ways that kids can learn outside of kind of the traditional school settings.
How does that fit in with the purpose of the extension?
So we're not tied into our school departments. We support them, but 4-H is a positive youth development. It's not necessarily thinking about specific content areas. So social justice is what kids are interested in, and we'll provide a safe and positive youth development pathway for them to do that.
But how does that fit when, I think when most people think of cooperative extension service, they think of gardening, preserving, produce, things like that. How does that fit in with this? This sounds like something different.
No, that's part of our positive youth development program. So we have two focuses. We have the youth through 4-H, and I think a lot of people have that vision of 4-H of like, oh, it's cows and cooking and preservation, which it is. I mean, we still have kids that are very involved in that, but it's much bigger. It's really helping kids to kind of figure out different pathways that they can explore informally, not with kind of a formal curriculum. So that's how it fits in with extension.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And by the way, I might add something too, from the outside, because I don't really do the 4-H, but for example, if you go to, I don't know about the virtual fair, but if you go to the Thompson Fair and you listen to the presentations that the 4-H youth put on, they're not related typically to what we classically think of as the cooperative extension function, gardening, preserving, all that kind of stuff. It covers a wide array of stuff. And I don't speak to that specifically, but from my perspective, it's just all part of that bringing new horizons and new experiences to the youth, which is part of what 4-H is supposed to do. If that
Could you
makes sense.
elaborate, Mr. Chair, could you elaborate on what, it says including legal, typically that means lawyers and fees, and
Oh.
what exactly?
Oh, no, legal meaning that the kids are interested in pathways to a legal career. So this is like thinking about, from a workforce development perspective, like what kinds of connections do you need to have as a young person to know what you need to do if this was a career pathway that you were interested in? So like if your end game was you wanted to be interested in law, who can I help connect you to understand what their experiences were, so you can kind of think about how you can get there. So it could be through community college, through the university, and then through law school. It could be through a different way. So it's almost kind of like a job shadow or an internship in a sense, that's very kind of tailored to the interests of the young person.
How is that difference from a high school guidance counselor or parents, connecting children with either colleagues or your recommend, how is that different?
Yeah, I mean, I think some parents do that, but not all parents do this. So it's another avenue for kids to have a caring adult outside of their home, which is one of the #1 factors around resiliency and kids being productive adults. So just similar to any other youth serving organization, giving kids an opportunity outside of school, because honestly, for a lot of kids, school isn't their thing and they're not going to seek that out through school, but through 4-H or through another avenue that they're involved in their community, it might be. So that's what makes it a little different.
And any reinforcement of those values that they get in the classroom is obviously.
Yeah, and we do
necessary
partner.
on
We
the
partner
outside.
closely with 21st Century program at Lewiston High School. We partner closely with other youth serving organizations, but we're a little bit different in terms of kind of how we do things.
The 64%, I may regret asking this question because I don't know how the population has shifted, but does that get readjusted periodically, or was that set when it was set up?
My understanding, it was set up before I started working with Extension. I've been with Extension for 14 years. So I think as commissioners, the two counties could kind of renegotiate as the census data comes out potentially, because I do think the populations of each county look a little bit different. And I don't know if it will be in your favor or not, so you might not want to do that.
I'm almost afraid to ask
But
it,
it might be worth exploring. I know the Saginaw County Commissioners are always willing to have that conversation.
Make a note of that.
The,
Figure out the answer first before we ask the
Yes.
question.
the agenda or the curriculum that, for the services you provide, is that largely determined by state law?
No, not at all.
So, just along the lines with Commissioner Larry's questioning on, I think you found it on the sheets, I don't know where I dug it up, but it seemed to be valid because it was back and forth with you two. But on the social, what was it, the social justice?
Social justice.
So I've been a supporter of extension for quite a while. And years ago, when I was in the legislature, we got in fights when they tried to cut the budget. So I'm certainly supportive overall of the program. But I think it should stay on purpose and be largely about farming. And leave other areas of education to a more appropriate bureau. So I think, I don't know the details of how that works, but both, I think. But I just want to say I'm sensitive to that. You want to stay on purpose, fairly narrowly defined purpose, and then would that be creative as you have been over the years?
And I will say that one project that Commissioner Larry is talking about is federally funded through USDA and NIFA, so it's an additional $660,000 to the two communities to provide it. So we're not asking for funding from the commissioners for that portion. It's direct funding to support kiddos in Lewiston and Portland.
It's free money.
And
Right, so I just want to be clear, this is just for really office expenses,
yes, absolutely.
not really
No.
extension expenses or extension.
Right.
Yeah, the university or grants and the like
Right.
drive the content. We're their home base. That's what we are, their office space,
And our support staff personnel.
support staff.
Okay. Any more?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Last page on the document on the budget, in the budget books that we have, says parenting education. Can you, looking at this, you provide some information on that, but can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So we have, in Androscoggin County, the majority of the parenting education contract is actually held through Community Concepts, so it's the Maine Families Program. But in Saginaw County, Cooperative Extension holds that contract for Maine Families, so Saginaw, Lincoln, and Knox are all under that parenting education. I will say in Androscoggin County, it's a very small portion of the work that comes out of our office, but we do have that parents as teachers curriculum and help support if families need that. But I will say Androscoggin County families are served through Community Concepts.
So how is that need determined?
Based on who has the contract. So it goes up for bid, it's an RFP through the state to determine who is the fiscal sponsor for the Parents as Teachers program. Right now, I believe it's birth to 3 first-time parents, and they can either self-refer or they can be referred through their healthcare provider or through DHHS.
Okay, by request, is this voluntary only, or is this through the healthcare provider that it's, you're
Mandatory.
signed at?
Yeah, my understanding is voluntary.
Well,
Yeah. I think it's heavily suggested for some things, but
And then with that, providing that clearinghouse, that does, while it's providing that home base, it does possibly provide things that may not be things that our county is wanting to support, or people in, my constituents are wanting to support it. So even though it may not maybe free money, I've also seen where we funded 2 sheriff patrol positions, but that money will disappear from the federal grant, and then we will be on the hook for that entire amount. So that's, there is no such thing as free money. I know you didn't state that, but I just want to clarify that I can almost guarantee we'll be on the hook for this later,
yeah, so
which concerns me greatly.
with our SIFAR project, this is the second 5-year cycle of this project, and we're required for sustainability, and we're not writing that into county dollars at all. So that is not an expectation of any of the grants that we're writing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, let's see, Scott is the president,
Yes, sir.
and is it Christine or
Christy. Yeah.
Christie's the director?
I'm an extension professor with 4-H Youth Development. So we have 2, myself and Tori Jackson. We're the 2 educators in the office.
And we know her as one of our educators, that's kind of her title, but she is a professor.
I am
Professor Willett?
Professor
Who's
Willow.
our other friend?
This is Jo Jean Keller, she's a member of our board.
Okay, okay.
Did we not?
This is my first time, so I'm here to
Yes.
learn.
We're teaching her the ropes.
Right, if things don't go right, we're gonna blame it on anybody.
It's all Jo
That
Jean's
was what I
fault.
told her when you came in.
You should have saw that coming when they invited you to this meeting, we hadn't been.
Exactly. Lured her in.
Okay, further questions? Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.
So, here comes trouble. 1076, civil process.
Civil process, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through it. It's a division of 4, and I guess I'll start off by saying when we look at all the divisions, understanding the economic impact that the COVID-19 issues have put all the communities, taxpayers in, us included. We really took to heart of, and you'll see through all 4 budgets, there's no asking for anything new. There's reductions in lines to make up for expenses in other lines that some we can't control and some are must have. And we'll get into them in each budget, I'll point them out like I always have. But for the most part, I can say we produced budgets that were status quo with slight adjustments, and obviously when you're talking close to 100 employees, the wage adjustments as well. Civil process is a division of 4 people, 3 cars. We're factoring in the car payment in there, where generally we would finance a used car if we could find one in the price range for 3 years, because that seems to be how long their cars last. But we plan on buying the used car from ourselves, combined with a couple other things. Our goal was to create capital accounts to get off the borrowing thing that we've been doing the financing, because we've had to finance the cars longer, which isn't in our best interest, because the costs have gone up. So combined with jail and civil, which I'll point out when we get there, we kept the civil payment where it's been for the used cars we've been buying. And what we plan to do with the combined jail payment and civil payment is buy 1 car cash outright, or combined with the financing that we'll do with the 4 cruisers we're buying for patrol to get a new civil car. What we'll actually do is we'll buy 5 new cars. 1 will go to CID, and the CID car that's 2016 with 30,000 miles on it will go to civil rather than buying a used car at Emerson. So when you look at the civil budget, it is the 4 employees, their wages, and that 1 car payment, and that's just about it. No changes to anything else.
Sheriff, thank you for joining us. How does the EMA vehicle get into the mix in your car discussion?
EMA.
Emergency
EMA,
management.
she has informed us she's no longer turning that over to us any longer. So this would ironically be the year we would get it. She advised us last year that that wasn't an avenue she wanted to pursue. She's hanging on to the car. So we have to replace. The civil car we're replacing has right now, well, at the beginning of the month, I believe it's a 2013 with 140,000 miles plus on it, and it's a Chevy Impala. So we wanted to replace it actually this year, but seeing how budgets were and cars were, we asked the guy that serves civil process in it, can you make it another year? And he said probably, and maybe under $1,000 worth of repairs,
Yeah.
it's made it the year, so that's the car we'll be replacing.
One of the things we had talked a bit about, maybe 3 months ago now, was looking at the revenues of the civil side. You were talking about doing a study of the market rate or potentially, seeing where we could go with those fees. Now, when I was looking at revenues, I didn't necessarily see any changes there, so it looks like can you speak to that?
Yeah, I will. Any changes we were to make like we have in the past, I believe we did an adjustment 2 or 3 years ago, we bring before you. It was our goal to adjust the fees this year where we could, but it was also action being proposed in the legislation, which obviously didn't follow through, as well as a new civil service manual that we finally received today. So we wanted to see what adjustments the state did to some of the state rates before we made any recommendations as far as what to implement. That way we wouldn't be coming back here making all these adjustments. And because of, again, how the virus was handled. Nothing was dealt with at the State House. So we probably could come back and make adjustments in the fall, because we did talk to our civil division director, supervisor about that. But at this time, you know, we're in the hole as far as revenues go. We've brought in about $75,000, you know, to date, or as of August 1st. So that gives us August, September, October, you know, 5 months to go, where usually we project about 225,000, but the courts were closed roughly 4 months. So they couldn't start selling papers because they couldn't get court dates, couldn't do evictions. That's been a longer process. But I can assure you, people are having babies, people are getting divorced, and people are getting evicted. So once the courts open back up, you can't make up for the lost time because they can only handle so much of a caseload, but we're already seeing more and more people through the door as far as services go.
So if, and I'm sure they're not idle per se, but if there was potentially time that could be used, are our staff members looking at the unpaid collections that are currently on the books?
Yeah, there was a review of the former billing done prior, and we thought it had been brought to, from the time that the supervisor of that division was there, prior to him, where we couldn't swear to if the billing was done appropriately. We thought it was brought forward to be taken off the books because there was an issue with the auditor. This was before Carice's time as well, and I don't even know if Larry might have been here at that time. There's no record of it, so we don't know what happens. So there is a large pool of money dating back to some year, I think it was like 2011?
2000, prior to 2012.
2012, where there was supposed to be, and the commissioners actually said, figure out what it is, and we'll go back to that date, because you can't just leave it there. It doesn't look right. And at the same time, the auditor said, you either got to do this, or I got to basically hunt down these people and settle for 25%. But the problem was, some of them are regular customers, that they might have paid the bill, and it might have been just documented inappropriately by the former division supervisor. So that was how we came to that, but we had the pile there forever, and we found out that it must have never made it back here to get officially wiped off. It appears the balance for the over 30 days is far less than it was if you were to take out that amount, which was somewhere around, I think it was $15,000.
Yeah, they've actually been working, what you asked about. There has been some money that they've actually been able to approve and clarify.
Yeah, so there's just more to it. There's a balance that we'll never recover, and there's a balance that they were working on. And they did stay busy even under the situation, because we're able to utilize them in other areas. It hasn't been the greatest year, even without the COVID issue, as far as a lot of things internally. So having them available actually helped out to offset what would have been the cost for personnel in other divisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sure, in that vein, are you saying that when they weren't doing their civil duties due to lack of, sadly, well, it's a good thing, people aren't divorcing and stuff, but in general, they were able to help almost like as reserve for the patrol officers? I assume they are qualified fully to be able to serve in that function?
3 of them are cross-trained. 2 of them are actively cross-trained to work on the road. 1 of them actually in the road in the jail. So we use them for some time to offset shifts for patrol purposes, because we only had so many staff to fill vacancies, and for a period of time we had 3 or 4 people out for a long period of time. So we were able to utilize them there, but there was still paperwork to do because they still had customers like attorneys' offices that they were doing stuff for. It just wasn't the same volume as we're used to.
So that would have hopefully realized some savings in overtime?
Yes, in other units.
Jail side. Okay.
The other thing we did is, when the big push was everybody stay home and don't have people anywhere, we only had 1 working the desk to handle customers coming in and 1 available for civil, and we alternated them like that as far as scheduling goes.
Thank you.
So it sounded like what I've seen here is that there's no overtime line in the civil division. It sounds like in the future, we may have a backlog of
there'll still be no overtime.
Okay.
They're 40 hours and they get as much as they can done in their 8-hour day. And I don't mean to sound like that, but that's the structure of that division.
That's it for,
It's a pretty simple one, and like I said, you'll see that, other than making adjustments in all of them, they're all status quo. Didn't think it was the new year, big year to bring any new ideas.
Just last comment, if you're looking at the new manual you received from the state and there's room for raising revenues on the civil division, or fees, can you do that in the near future before we finalize the budget? Maybe there's an opportunity to revise our revenue line if we could.
I don't expect anything from the state. What I'm willing to do, because I know Commissioner Krishna was a really strong advocate of addressing the civil, and I said we would. We were just waiting for everything to fall into play, and then everything kind of fell apart. But we can look at independently what our director recommends for minor adjustments. It won't affect the state rates that are set, and it'll keep us competitive with the market, because ironically there is a market. And if there is something that is worthwhile doing immediately, we'll be fine, we'll bring it to you. And if we have to make adjustments 3 to 6 months from now, or 2 weeks after that, again, I think it's the way to go to recover revenue.
all right, you're ready to move on to Sheriff's Department.
Again, it's pretty much status quo. We reduced the K-9 line because training isn't available as far as bringing on another K-9 for replacement. That was our hope for this year. So where the academy is available, and we're testing a new training with our K-9 we added last year, we want to see how that goes. But it was able to help offset with the expenses, we'll say, in the car increases. We kind of got to get back to financing for a shorter time, but we need to replace the vehicle. So we'll probably continue with longer financing, but we are asking for more money because the cars cost more now. They went from when we were first buying them, our bids were coming in at roughly $28,000. I think now they're coming in at about $36,000.
Fords are coming around 35, and about 35, plus the equipment.
Plus the equipment. So,
And of course, Ford changed their design, so we had to get all new equipment.
in the request to staff and my preference and what we're dealing with, we used to save money by not putting, I hate saying the word, but anyway, cages in the back of the cars. Every new vehicle we get from this point forward for patrol, we'll have a cage in the back for officer safety and protection of the inmate, the arrestees. Currently, all of our cars don't have cages. And there's been times where we have to call other agencies to assist us with uncooperative individuals. So the way to go was, some people didn't like cages in their cars, but at this point, with what we're seeing and what we're dealing with all the time, we're putting cages. We're not putting them in our existing fleet. It's as we get new cars, rear cages will go in. So that added a little bit of an expense.
Do you need those now to protect the officers?
No, we got 3 cars coming in sometime. They'll be the first 3, and next year we'll be purchasing 5, but one's a civil car, one will end up going to CID, so we'll be adding 3 more again. What we're hoping to do is have a cage available for each shift that's working.
Okay.
So at least if you arrest someone and you don't have a cage and I do, you can call me over and I'll take your arrest in for you if there's an issue.
I just want to make sure the officers are safe.
Well, with the way they keep redesigning I thank you for that, but the way they keep redesigning these cars, if we were to purchase these cages for all of them, we could trade 5 in next year and the cages aren't reusable. Generally, you can get 5 to 10 years out of a redesign. These were just redesigned in 2015 or 16, and here we are, 2019, they redesigned them all again. So,
And I've seen, thankfully not from the passenger position, but I've seen, walking by, a trooper's car or a police car, seeing like the plexiglass. Is that something that you could do that would get that closer but not be so custom fit?
the cage we're putting in is a complete plexiglass. We have internal cameras in the car, but also it'll help with view of what we're seeing with people concealing contraband, or maybe, they'll be able to see them better than, of course, at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, when there's no natural light it makes things difficult. But it's better to make it difficult seeing somebody that's secure than it is somebody that's roaming around your back seat, you don't see when they're about to headbutt you or something.
Yeah. And with the canine, sorry.
No, it's all right, I can hear you.
With the canine unit, basically, you're just not able to do it because, or you're taking that off for this coming budget cycle because of the training issues.
We're taking it off because we're looking at the financial situation, but there's training issues with the academy.
Yeah.
We found alternative training for our current canine,
Okay.
and it's been successful in the southern part of the state, but we've never done it, so it actually gives us a chance to evaluate, do we like this as opposed to what we've traditionally done?
Okay.
I'm thinking I like what we've traditionally done, but we're giving this a go. So financially and from that perspective, it makes more sense to put it on hold for, till next year.
Okay, so you feel that with, at least currently, with the one canine, you'll be able to ensure
Yep.
safety?
And then we just want two, so that way we have them for each one for each rotation. That's the goal. And we have strong interest from individuals that work here, but financially and training-wise, it made sense to put it off a year.
Thank you.
The EMA director is needing a bigger vehicle to pull her the EMA trailer when they need an allocation. I'm looking for any way that we could put that off of a year. You've got some bigger vehicles in the sheriff's department. What kind of inconvenience would it cause you to pull that EMA trailer for her on the occasion that she needs it at Balloon Festival or wherever?
I didn't know she had a trailer. I don't know if she currently does.
It's just,
It wouldn't inconvenience us. We're more than happy to help her out in the times she might need her trailer pulled.
I mean, I think, she, you know,
No, we have a
I've
jail.
been thinking about you all, and I don't wanna see us pull up with some sort of shabby deal, but if we could put that big expense off a year, it would be
We've-
helpful.
I mean, I don't like butting in on other people's budgets, well, except for Larry's. But anyway, if there's an issue to get the task done without hurting her cause, because that's clearly not something I want to do, I wouldn't want somebody to do it to me. We would have vehicles available with notice that we have a transport, the Suburban there, that we tow trailers around with that all the time. So it's already equipped to do it, and it's probably got the plug-ins. You know, to help everybody out for the year, I don't have a problem doing it. I don't think long-term it's in anybody's best interest. And just make sure you tell her
I
it was your
know, you
idea.
won't be the bad, I'm the bad guy on this.
And it's nothing I really want to do either, that's true.
But that works.
I will say the other issue in that particular case is that the cost is $10,000, but $5,000 of it's reimbursed. So it's only a $5,000 vehicle.
And you also have the county truck, I'm sure that could tow it.
I know,
Yeah.
there we go.
You have Dave on that with Chris. and
Not to mention Larry's SUV.
Larry doesn't have an SUV.
yet.
Yeah, he didn't read the fine print of his contract, he's required to buy one now.
But no, I mean, as far as helping out, we can, I wouldn't want to be the cause of somebody not accomplishing something in their budget, because
I'm the one that's looking through every line to see what could we wait till next year until everyone's on a steadier ground.
well, and it's important for you guys to know that all four divisions, we did that. I mean, when we talked to Larry about it, we really tried to, as best we could. I mean, there's some adjustments we had to make, and some purchases we're gonna have to make, like cars, and overtime adjustments, but we tried to maintain, because we get it.
And you don't have any expected retirements or anything in 2021? That would be replaced?
Yeah. No, well, we only got one guy that could.
Like high expenditure replaced with low expenditure?
Yeah, he'd be a high expenditure replacement. I don't see him wanting to, but we also are aware he could any day. You know, so, but there's nothing that we know of. Yeah, would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's potentially one, but.
And as far as retirement goes, it wouldn't be retirement like the retirement we just dealt with. It's, you know, they're just Social Security, I'm out. But there's, actually, now that you mentioned, there's two individuals that could potentially leave at any time. I just don't think they're planning on it.
Okay, so a total of 3 or just 2?
No, there's two individuals currently working here
Okay.
that I think one would be if a better offer came along, he might consider, and the other, I just think sometimes, in the interest of time, he might just say, all right, I've done enough throughout my career and I'm ready to move on, you know, so. Other than that, I think we've got a solid group in the patrol division here to stay.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say I appreciate, I mean, you always try to cut costs for my constituents, but I appreciate the work that the officers are doing. I believe strongly that the vast majority of officers wake up in the morning, almost complete majority, 99.9% of them all wake up in the morning to do their job and serve their community. They're not there to harm anybody, they're not there to pick on anybody, regardless of what background or color or anything, and I appreciate what they do. And I'd be grateful if you pass it on to your force. Thank you.
And just to let you guys know, I know you had passed on another sentiment, somewhat, you know, right around the time you read the last contract. I did pass that on to staff, and I think it was good timing, and it's always appreciated. Just like, I think something that's helped out is, whether you look at it or not, the support of staff with negotiating the recent contract, I think helps us out, and having a contract in place for our labor unit, you know, that was negotiated prior, along with, you know, what you've passed on. We do hear a lot from the community. You know, we've had some really generous donations, but a lot of messages passed on, and we do pass them on. So I think, given the times and what's going on around the nation, and we pay attention to it, I know I do, it's good to know that at least the employer is on board with helping us in our professions.
What is the security services line?
It's details, so football games, dances, or we hung around at, what was that, Brookfield, Brownfield? What do they call it?
Cherry Pond.
Cherry Pond. They were having problems with people hanging around, mischievous, speeding.
What town?
Green.
Oh,
But there's an organization that paid, the residents of say, hey, we, you know, they work with us, and they've been great with us, we said, talk to them about hiring a detail, and they have. So that's been the latest one, where we have guys sitting out on Cherry Pond for 4-hour increments at the detail rate that Brookfield, Brownfield, something like that pays for.
This is a small one, but I'm just curious to know what miscellaneous minor equipment is.
How much is it for?
500.
It's for miscellaneous minor equipment. It's for things that may come up, that, like a holster, I guess, would that be?
Yeah, it can be holster, because sometimes Modron with his technical stuff, something will come up.
Something over the budget, but we have in case of a pinch. In the past, we used to go to that surplus place in Augusta to buy junk furniture from them if we needed a file cabinet or something. It literally, and I do mean to be sarcastic, but it is literally just money to have on hand for, you know, emergencies, but, or opportunities to buy something.
Gotcha, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. White?
Is that Poland contract for 268 already signed, and that's good to go?
It's signed, I don't know what the, is it?
It's 268, they just finalized their
Okay.
contract warrant yesterday, so.
And weren't we talking about another SRO opportunity?
No, they were gonna expand to 24-hour coverage,
Oh, right.
but it kept getting delayed, so then we gave them a 9-month, a 6-month contract, and I think it got a little confusing with everything, so then you had, again, everybody's been affected financially by the COVID.
Yeah.
So they decided to hold off for now, so we went right back to the 2.
On to death benefits.
Mr. Chair.
Is that under the same, oh, I see, 1077. That was on the one document I got, that gives a 1075, okay. It's not a separate line?
Well, it's,
Or
we
is it
debated this,
combined
it's
as it
supposed
is?
to be a separate budget in itself, and it's just the death benefit paid for medical insurance. But we've also seen it incorporated in the 1075 account, which kind of threw us off, we don't know what happened there. And I
We think Clarice fixed it. for us,
Yeah,
but-
we think it's fixed, so. Either way, it's gotta be paid.
Is there anything in the statute that allows for increases for inflation or anything? Is this paying for the health insurance or just?
It's just a health
I just know
insurance.
that,
It's actually a death benefit,
okay,
but I don't believe there's any COLA built in.
okay.
All right, 10.7A, communications.
Communications is another one. We had to make adjustments. Reserves, part-time employees aren't really practical for the amount of training needed and the amount of repetition they need with their job, so we transferred the money to overtime. But this one is all status quo. There's nothing new in there. We have goals to add in employees or dispatchers to it. Obviously with the call sharing going away, not only are we covering more calls as an agency, but those calls are coming in through our dispatch agency, so they're handling a lot more. Where we had already, we're kind of pushing them with the workload they were handling, now that we're getting a larger call volume. And what happens is, when you're getting that call volume, multiple people are calling to report the same accident. So it takes a lot of time to just, and you're occupying somebody's time to continue answering a phone, while one other person is trying to dispatch the call, and maybe medical resources or anything else needed. So there is a staffing need that we've been holding off. It's in this budget. It's a status quo, paying for the debt for the radio project and things like that. And we adjusted, because part-time employees aren't practical, to funnel the money, if that doesn't sound right. Transfer the money to the overtime wages that we need to replace people when they're off. We haven't really had reserves in like 2-3 years anyway. It's not a profession where it's practical. The increase you're seeing is, if you remember, the stipend issue is going to reflect in this budget. So I'm not sure what the increase is, because there's nothing to point out that we're doing different, but the stipends do kick in here for the adjustment that was made to our dispatchers.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner.
Officer Poirier, what would, and it's easy for me as a commissioner, I think this could work, and it's much more detailed than actually making this happen, but is there the ability to possibly work with another county so that we had some sort of a float employee, so that you have that backup when needed, and at the same time able to share that cost, or almost like a per diem, where there's a need for that training. But I don't know. It's easy for me to say that. I would assume though that most of the training has to be the same anyways per state or federal statute.
That's an interesting question. I never really looked at it that way. I did look at it from a different perspective, but each agency has their own set of unique guidelines and policies and procedures,
Okay.
as well as when you start broadening that scope to looking outside Androscoggin County, there are different systems, computer systems. And I think the sheriff can attest to this, that in one system, F10 saves all the information you put into it, where on the most logical competitor's product, F10 will delete everything.
Okay.
So dispatching is definitely a muscle memory type of process.
Sure.
So the longer you do something, the faster you are, it's your body's just muscle memory takes over for you. So that would cause conflicts.
What about within the county then, like, my own,
So-
one of my own constituent was then, I think Durham, there's a couple of
So
dispatch.
there's a dispatch center in Lisbon, there's another PSAP in Androscoggin County, Lewiston, and 911. Those are each individually governed by individual union contracts. So there might be some.
The problem is we'll end up stealing each other's employees. That's the bigger problem. And then you'll have, policy and procedures that might be a little bit different, like LA 911 has a call taker that distributes calls, so tonight you're dispatching for Lewiston PD, or for Lewiston Fire, or Auburn Fire, or Auburn PD. We're here, we're two people working doing the same thing.
Okay.
When he's talking about, like, if we were to reach out to Oxford, because we've employed people in Oxford County, they're on Spillman, Records Management, we're on IMC. F10 for us is your friend, F10 for them cleans the slate.
Okay.
And it's not a market where there's a lot of employees, so that theft of employee thing would probably occur,
Okay.
so.
I guess if it's something.
Good way to say
if
it.
it's
The other
easy to
issue is-
explore it, I'd be grateful, but obviously I recognize it doesn't sound like it's very feasible, but maybe
Well,
it
and-
worked great.
When we were looking
Okay.
at locations and things like that, and talking to the director at the 911 center, he thought it would make sense if we were under the same roof, which would give those opportunities. I think that's kind of a scary proposition, but I understand what he's saying.
Okay, thank you.
Just, I don't know, this is a bit of a side, but in the past, we talked about opportunities for, I guess, our consolidation of other communities, small dispatch centers that we work in. Is there any movement on that or prospects?
We've gotten everybody in the county, with the exception of Lisbon, and they use their town hall as a warming station, and they're hot and cold on consolidating, so I would say they're in business to stay. We're still their PSAP. That's on them. And then you have LA Com, which handles all Lewis and Auburn, and I think we share a records management system with them, as well as everybody else in the county. Lisbon is on their own, except we take their 911 calls. So I would say the only logical opportunity would be if Lisbon decided to close shop. We would hope that they would come on with us. So, but there's no more within the county that's happening. Well, Leeds right now is being dispatched through Winthrop. And we've tried to talk to them because we have some extended relationships with them, but they want to cheap out, and we're a little bit more expensive than what they're getting at Winthrop, because at Winthrop, it's free.
So it sounds like we have more staffing needs. You had mentioned in the past that I don't know if it was the state rules, they were changing, I forget what it's called, but essentially the procedure, questions that dispatchers were to ask. Does that impact the need for the employees? Was
Well,
it as
it's
dramatic as we thought?
It's a time thing. It hasn't happened for police calls yet. It's fire and EMS. The drive was for police calls where it'll probably happen. Hopefully, it'll happen when I'm like 65, so but it'll happen, and that will, it's more time consuming because they gotta go through, you know, if they say this, go here, if they say that, go there. I think it's effective for medical purposes. I question if it's practical for law enforcement services, but if that's the way the market goes, obviously, we're not afraid to go there either. Because it does have some, if we're following the model, I think it would reduce liabilities to ensure that the right questions are asked before we dispatch the call. But those things take time in a dispatch center.
Just one last thing, could you remind us about how many staff are in the dispatch center, maybe who they are?
There's like 8 of them, 8 or 9, counting Marty.
Currently, there's 8 full-time dispatchers, 1 supervisor, and myself. We also have a permanent part-time position at roughly 32 hours a week. What we're looking to do is just enhance that 32 hours to a 40 hour.
He was just asking how many there.
Yeah.
So there's 9 full-time dispatchers, with one of them being the supervisor and Marty. So there's a total of 10 in the division right now. And currently, 5 nights a week from 3 to 11. If nobody calls out sick, we have 3 people on, because call volume seems to pick up from 2 in the afternoon till whenever at night. So that was where we elected to put the 1 extra. When we did that, our hope was to have 3 more often than not. It would actually be helpful if we could put them on the same kind of schedule as patrol in the jail. But we can't because they're not certified, or I forget the name of the rule. So it would be overtime because they work a 15-day rotation. So we have to leave them in 40-hour weeks, which makes scheduling a little difficult. But the hope would be to have 3 on at a time more often than not, where currently we only have 3 on 40 hours a week.
Are we ready to move on to supported prisoners?
Thanks. we have a issue, as far as capital, that was, we budgeted $140,000 for, that we're looking at getting done hopefully this fall if maintenance is started on it. It's got to do with the controls for our heating and cooling system, where it's been failing and we've been putting it off. So we're hoping to address that within this budget, or we have to, because it's on a shoestring right now. The guy operating the camera could probably tell you a little bit more of the details about that than I can. Other than that, we reduced our board of prisoners because last year our head count went way down. So we're rolling the dice there, where originally we had $100,000 budgeted, now we've got it down to 30, because we do anticipate having the board out again and we'll need something there. So we left $30,000, although we've been told that the boarding rate is gone up from the deal we had before with the county that was holding our prisoners. And our medical contract went up like $60,000. So we tried to balance out the cost as best we could, but when you're talking 50 to 60 employees, wages and everything included, it's within a reasonable frame. And Larry's got some numbers that I believe are, reflect positively as far as the 3% issue that we're allowed to go within the cap. We're actually budgeted less than that. We actually went, what, 2?
We budgeted 2% increase on the county side. We are getting less money from the state, from just recently, that's, or at least we think we are. They haven't made their final determinations yet on a couple of those issues. Anyway, so the bottom line to the county tax is a 2% increase. And then the rest of it you can see in the revenues side. We did have some money left over from last year that we carried forward to offset the budget as well, so.
And as far as the capital, just in case you missed it earlier or forgot, because I've talked longer than Clarice wanted me to probably. We have a car payment in there, but again, the intent is to combine the jail payment and the civil payment to hopefully offset the cost of purchasing the vehicles. While originally we wanted to work at establishing the capital accounts for vehicles for the agency, it's just not the time to do it, but it's a way to keep the budget going and take care of the needs we have currently, if that makes any sense. So you'll find that in there as a $25,000 payment. And the reason the difference is the jail has more vehicles, goes through the cars more frequently. So when you look at the cost of the car and as far as what portion they should be budgeting, $7,500 seemed fair for civil because of the length they're getting out of the car, where the higher for the jail seemed practical because their cars cost more as far as the jail van with the van cell in it, and all the equipment we put in to your transport vehicles.
How many vehicles does the jail have? Is it just transport?
5.
And it's 5 transport vans, or?
No, there's a van with a van cell. There's the Suburban that does a lot of the towing for the programs, and it's also used for prisoner transport as well. There's 2 cruisers that are used for runs across the state to the dentist office, to court, get prescriptions for the, so they use the smaller vehicles, 2 of those to, they're more practical. But a lot of times for the court runs, it's the van cell. That's why the van usually will last 10, 20 years. What happens with the van is it ends up rotting out, and that was why we had to replace the last one, because that van cell weighs so much. We weren't here when they purchased this current one, but the last one I think had 50,000 miles on it when it was replaced, but it would never pass inspection again. I believe some of you were here when we replaced the Ford Expedition. Ironically, that vehicle was 20 years old, had 90-something thousand miles on it, but that one had been rotted, repaired, and it couldn't be again. So we bought this Suburban, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. And again, the purpose is for the programs, alternative sentencing programs, and for the program director to use to check if we'd ever have people out again. But transport, I find, uses it a lot as well, We had considered increasing the fleet for transport to add another vehicle, but for a number of reasons, we've decided to hold off on that. And not this year, it was a discussion we've had in past years. We just decided to hold on.
Mr. Woodruff?
Sure. It looks like that we're not anticipating increased costs due to the pandemic and the jail. Could you talk about, your thoughts on that and where that's going?
I don't, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we've actually seen some decreased costs, but they're not going to carry over till next year, so I guess we've increased the cost because of the pandemic.
We increasing it?
Yeah.
I sent the state a bill for putting their prisoners, which they haven't paid yet, but that's about $45,000. As far as increased costs, I think you'll see our food bill will go back up. Is that what you're talking about?
I was just imagining maybe certain things that you have to do in the jail to ensure safety, whether it's, I don't know, changing the way we did things to try to protect the inmates due to the
Yeah, a lot of
pandemic.
the steps we took really weren't a cost issue, it was more of staffing and how we space people out of the facility and cleaning stuff, so I wouldn't say it was a price tag, that stuff.
On that vein, it looks as though there are overages in both prisoner hospitalizations and prisoner prescriptions.
Yes.
And, as a result, you've asked for more. The prisoner prescriptions line, but are remaining the same in hospitalization.
Well, the hospitalization thing, we had a bad year because of one individual. And he had some sort of problem, and is he still here?
Yes.
And he's been here for over 2 years. He's pre-trial. And he has a medical issue that, until they figured out how to handle it and figured out we were gonna go regularly, he was costing us a lot of money. And he still costs us money. So when you're budgeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, when Jeff budgets for the hospital stays, the prescription, you kinda gotta go with what you think you'll pay based on, and I think when you look at last year, it was not reasonable to pay that much. That was an exception to the rule. So
We're optimistic that this individual will move on. He costs us a lot of money. We're working really closely with our healthcare provider to kind of minimize those out care stuff at the hospitals and stuff, so you may see that I'm budgeting a little less than, it's really, this was a year that's kind of unprecedented at those costs.
Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
So is this budget actual on the jail's fiscal year basis?
yeah, they go July to June.
Right, is that what, so
Yes.
I'm seeing.
We're in it
So I'm
already.
actually seeing, on this FY '20 actuals, I'm seeing the totals through June 30th, is that correct? So, so in FY '19, we budgeted 6.9 million, we had actually 6.6 million. In FY '20, we had 7.1 million, we actually had 6.7 million. So, I mean, there's been a $300,000 under, budgeted over by $300,000 each of those last 2 years. Is there similar types of padding in this?
Last year, we were, for portions of time, now the jail is different than every other budget. And I don't really like it, but it is, and it doesn't matter, you gotta pay the bill somewhere. Everything, every cost accrued by the jail is in the jail budget, and it's not like any other division you do budgets on. Well, last year, we had 10 vacancies for like a couple months. We were shorthanded, so there was some savings that we shouldn't have experienced because we didn't pay for their medical insurance, we didn't pay their wages, things of that nature. So I know that the savings seems, but I would be wary of counting on it every year, because as of right now, we only have 2 full-time openings.
I don't believe if the pandemic hadn't hit, you would see that.
The pandemic allowed us not to fill,
In FY '20 and FY
Because
'19.
of overtime, vacations, people go on vacations and.
we didn't have to replace, I mean, our headcount, we got it down to in the 70s. Even with the state employees, state inmates we had here.
Some of them was temporary.
So, currently our headcount's right under 150. It was 147 this morning, it was 143 tonight. So when the headcount's that high, more people manage, so when people are not here, like vacation, we have to replace them. Where we had a long period of time where we could actually work short-handed because there wasn't a need.
We were on track with boards of prisoners as well, I believe.
Yeah, we
So there's,
take them in.
I don't think, Larry can weigh in, I don't really think that we would have spent that money if we could have kept going.
But if you look at just the 10 vacancies we had for it was at least a month, and it was rotating, we'd hire people, people would quit, and it was very frustrating, and there was like no one in sight. Well, you look at, you know, each person when they're coming and going, you're looking at saving, you know, $2,000 a month times 10 people. You know, though, all these pennies everywhere add up as well as the lower grocery bills and water, sewer, everything incorporated with the cost of one place.
Mr. Chair. I guess I'm agree with,
Go ahead.
Who's, the administrator wants to talk, and
I still have
who's first? So the administrator?
yes, go ahead.
And also in the past, the night they hired me 5 years ago, the week before, these guys had like 45 minutes to cut, what, $800,000 out of the jail budget.
Right.
And we've never really recovered from that. We've been, and part of the issue has been that they will squeeze a penny until it starts to cry. And that's been the tradition throughout. And in this case, it's a good thing we had that money left over last year, because I think I'm gonna have to use it. We're going to have to use it this year,
Well, that's
because it's in the budget.
right. That leads into my next question on the revenue side.
And,
Our revenue is going down from the state now.
yeah,
Yeah, right. So I get that. I get the revenue's going down from the state, and that, you know, the counties are petitioning to have essentially the tax cap go away or to have it raised so that we can raise more taxes. But
yeah.
I'm not really concerned about raising taxes right now, but I just want to make sure on the revenue side, it looks like you're budgeting to use $766,000 from fund balance, if I'm understanding.
The year-end deficit, some of that we'll get from the state. We were anticipating to pull them out. What happened this year was, that amount is what we're going to be short this year.
Right.
Now, in the last legislature, they, apparently in the law, that we my colleagues all just discovered a little while ago, is that it was based on, that there was $2.8 million set aside for those that needed supplemental. And that was based on what you actually were in a deficit from last year. So, that's why I had to bring that 400,000 in, because we didn't have deficit last year, and so it's questionable, and they haven't determined exactly how much of that supplemental we're going to actually receive from the state this year.
Well, I'm wondering about that, right?
But that's one of those things where,
As far as my understanding is concerned, is that if you didn't have a deficit, you're not gonna get the same level of one-time funding that you did last year.
it looks as though that'll be cut back, but there's still, according to the last numbers that I've seen, we'll get at least half of it, if not more, so depending on.
So that 366, that isn't, I was thinking that was a use of fund balance, that's not a use of fund balance?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you're just doing 400,000 from use of fund balance?
Yes, and as to whether we get that this year or whether the state actually gives it next year for this year.
In the argument on our end, it sounds like you're talking $300,000. The argument on our end is, depending on what the legislature does, one way or another, and we all have, sometimes you gotta take your lumps. There's like, Androscoggin gets $260,000 to $300,000 by this certain way, but they're trying to incorporate everything in it. If nothing passes, the question is, well, what happens? You know, losing the $250,000 to $300,000, we agree, if that's what it comes to, we're better off than what they're proposing we'd have to do to get it. But we believe that it'll fall back on the last law, which, in some regards, I look at this legislative not coming back in a session thing, and from a law enforcement perspective and from a jail budgeting perspective, I kind of hope they don't, because they're gonna create a mess. But there is some risks, because they hold leverage where if they create legislation, we could lose the supplemental, which is almost $300,000, but ooh, the cost to get the $300,000 would be bad for us. Not in a financial sense, in a practical operation sense. So there is that figure. We've been, I think it was around $268,000 they were projecting. Because they said, you realize by voting this way, when I said I'm not supporting that bill, you could lose, and I think it was $268,000. I'd rather, because I don't want to, deal with the devil just for, we can figure out where to come up with that money, if that's what it actually comes to.
What he's talking about is the latest iteration of the
Jail funding bill.
jail funding bill, which everything was all in, package, and then when it got the final days, they all just went haywire, and there was stuff in there that, they was going to create, it almost looked like another BOC, to oversee the jails, and there was a whole host of.
The intent was a funding formula that made sense and was fair, and it would affect everybody the same. The Criminal Justice Committee got hold of it, and they created committees and oversight and this and that and the other, and I'm willing to work with anybody, but there becomes a limit with what you're working with. So I withdrew my support for the bill if they're going to amend it to that. So they're working on trying to get that removed to bring it back to its original intent, which was a funding formula.
And the Maine State, the Maine Sheriff's Association withdrew support for the bill.
So we'll find out, and that's where that difference of $250,000 to $300,000 comes in.
Commissioner Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, you said the cost for the state prisoners was $45,000, is that,
Well, that's not what I'm saying the cost is. I'm saying that's why I billed them.
what do you estimate is the cost?
I can't really, we were paying, when we boarded prisoners, $65 a day. So my intent was to bill the state $65 a day, because I felt
That's
I
at
can
least
prove
comparable.
why, and it's
Yeah.
fair. And other places charge more. And then I was talking to a sheriff of another county, so well, this sheriff and I talked, and we decided to give them a deal, $60 a day. So I didn't want to seem, unfair. So I said, all right, so we billed them for $60 a day. The first bill we sent was $30,000 and change, and the second bill we sent was, I think, $14,900. So it's right around $45,000 we billed them to date. If we have no more state employees, we have one more bill, but it's for pennies in comparison, But we're gonna bill them every 30 days. They haven't responded by phone call or by mail, email, or mail to the billing. So we're looking at alternatives to see how we can somehow, see if we have the ability to collect what we feel is owed to us.
Yeah, I would hope we would even consider legal action.
Well, we are.
Because it's not right for them to keep people here,
I actually agree with you.
charge us all this money. With the supplemental, Sheriff, did they give any reason why they're looking at cutting these costs? Why they're looking
The
at
figure,
reducing the money coming to?
No, I just think the figure they're working from, which because I thought it was always 20 million, 21 million. Apparently it's down to 15 or 18 million. So there's less money available in the system, right? I mean, I might be off on the millions, but I said, well, if it was fully funded to where it was, and then they said, well, it wasn't. So what it was is they had a figure of 17, 18 million, and then later on another 3 million that was your supplemental. And I think what they did is they dropped that and just gave the 17, 18 million, divided in the formula, but brought it down to 15 million, still making 2 million available for supplemental. So we're working on a $2 million figure, maybe 3 higher for the regular funding. It's now lower. The supplemental funding's still there, but that's a little bit, less as well. So
What essentially has happened to the supplemental, the latest things that we've gotten, and again, it's not set in stone, is that those that had a deficit last year put in for their supplemental from their deficit last year. And then there's money left over. And then that money left over was split up by formula. At least that's the recommendation that I've seen a couple of weeks ago that and we don't know what's gonna happen with that.
And is there reasoning behind not funding this? Are they they saying the money's not there? That they don't have enough money to
No,
give to the counties?
it's the way it's funded, because not all 16 counties need supplemental funding. And in the way that it's being done, all 16 counties will actually get supplemental funding.
And that was something at the onset that was discussed, because there was one county in particular, and he might have changed his tune, but he didn't want any of their money because there was conditions on it. And he didn't need it anyway, but he said, keep it. I said, well, the problem is, you're giving money to County A that doesn't need it, and that's taken away from County B, which does need it. And they all agreed that's what happened, but that was how it was set up.
I would just think that the rainy day fund that was created over 8+ years would be available at this time, and the fact that that's spent.
I actually don't think that that's needed. I think they've just lowered their overall, what they budgeted. I mean, during the pandemic, we ran all the risk, but they gave out hazard pay to their employees. And I'm not saying it's not deserved, but, so I don't think there's a $2 million financial issue with the state.
The other thing that we don't know yet is because we submitted it last week, is the amount of community corrections money that we're going to get. The number that I saw projected was that we'd get 168,000. Last year we get 300 and something thousand, and our request this year was for 300 and something thousand. So we don't really know what that, and I only projected in the budget 160 something thousand, which was the number that we were given based on the formula they had, but that may change drastically, and we may end up with some more.
Mr. Chair. I guess,
Go ahead, Commissioner, we'll go to Commissioner Kuster.
I guess I'm concerned about the 2-year pretrial. I realize you don't control that, it's a DA thing, but you mentioned that there's one gentleman that's
Oh, yeah.
2-year pretrial.
I thought you were talking about pretrial. The services we contract with.
No, 2-year pretrial inmates, I'm greatly concerned, and I would like to see us try to pursue some sort of legal recourse, whether it's against the Fed or against the state, because it's ridiculous when we have people in there for 2 years. And I've heard the DA's explanation, but there is absolutely no justification for 2 years being in jail that long. It doesn't take that long to get a trial or get evidence compiled, so I'm just really concerned. And for that matter, are we, could we look at actually suing?
Would you suing ourselves because it's the district attorney?
Well, not the district attorney, because from his explanation, it's the court system, he doesn't have control over it.
It might be somebody talking to him, which we've done. We kind of get what they're doing, not that we agree with it, but I don't believe there's a remedy for us.
Perhaps we as a county commission pursue that though. I think it's at this point, 2 years is obscene, and I don't criticize you.
No, I think it was May of 2018, right, is when he came in?
But that's,
It is a long time, but I don't, his case is unique, I will say that, but it still is an excessive amount of time, but.
yeah. And it's not a criticism of your, but I'm saying it affects your budget, that's why I bring it up here.
Yeah, it affected us really bad last year, because his hospital visits, not only the visit himself, but it was, staff members that were always there with him as well,
Yeah.
so it gets very costly very quick.
Thank you, Mr.
If the legislature doesn't come back, will there be a supplemental?
Well, yes, I think we're better. This is gonna sound bad on paper. I think we're better off if the legislature doesn't come back.
Yeah, I thought they were going to come back to vote on.
No, the money's already there.
The money's there.
Starting next year is when this new LD 973 was going to take effect.
So,
But the money for this year is already there.
and then, some were confused with, well, what happens? Well, what happens is you revert to what's existing right now. And what's existing right now is a funding mechanism that although a stressful process, worked for us. So that would be the default. And I'm liking the default better than I'm liking what is being proposed. And I believe you probably find 13 other sheriffs that felt the same way, because two don't have a jail. So it's just, I think there's a lot of legislation that's gone way off course during this time.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair,
vaccines, are we going to be requiring inmates to take
No.
rapidly developed vaccines or vaccines?
No, it's nothing we do, and you can't force people to take vaccines anyhow.
Thank you.
Have to go to court to force people, right?
Very good.
Just, it happens.
All right, no further questions? Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it. Pleasure of the board to adjourn.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Larry.
Major Shooter, I'd just like to say thank you to you and your staff for keeping the costs down and working so hard to keep costs down. It's not easy with the jail.
Thank you.
You and your crew do.
Appreciate it, I'll pass it on. Appreciate that.
Amen. I'd like to involve.
Just as a reminder, next week is the public hearing, and then when you make your final decision on budget to send.
Don't forget to fix my heat.
Is that decision made next week, our decision, or next meeting after that?
Next week.
Public hearing and that decision. There may be a pizza meeting.
And so we're gonna rearrange it, we're gonna have our regular meeting after the.
Yeah, there shouldn't be much on it.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved. Seconded. Seconded by Roy. All those in favor? Those opposed?
I was in favor.
Mr. Chair,
Are you in favor
I'd just
or
like to propose, I'd like to say, I'd like to see us look at a 2.75 or a 2.5% increase per staff instead. And typically the response has been that we don't have time to calculate that, so I'm giving respectful fair notice now.
I don't have any interest in.
That's not up to you, Mr. Close. It's up to the
Neither is
commission.
it up to you, sir.
Yep, but it is up to the commission, so I'm giving you fair warning that it would be nice to have that calculated so it could be considered. Thank you.
Larry, Jim, accept? So that